Hi everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And this is going to be longer than usual because I actually missed last Sunday due to illness and then travel and all those kinds of things. So I'm just glad to be back in the saddle. Let's put it that way. And with that, as always, I want to start with the people that sent me a lot of this information because without you guys, it's much, much longer to get these things done. And that would be Jason Dance, Jacqueline Wolf, Barrett Peterson, Matt Knowles, and Chris Fallon. Guys, thank you so very much. And as always, let's get started because we got no time to lose. And we are going to be starting with Nuna Baby Essentials. Now, apparently, the company recently reported that from March 26th of 2020, through April 7th of 2021, so over a year, quote, malicious code appeared on the company's website. It was discovered on December 22nd of 2021. We are talking about affected data such as credit card payment numbers, expiration dates, the 3-digit codes, and billing and shipping addresses. So if you've shopped online at Nuna Baby Essentials website, heads up to you, you may have been breached. Moving on, let's talk about Midland University because they recently announced a data breach stemming from a malware attack. Still forthcoming on details, we're waiting for those, but as a result of this, the data impacted is names, addresses, driver's license numbers, state IDs, social security numbers, and more. So heads up to you. If you have anything to do with Midland University, you may be caught up in that. Moving on, let's talk about Star Tech, not Star Trek, Star Tech Inc. They announced basically that they had a data security event involving an unauthorized third-party access to one of their computer systems and removing certain data. That's all we know, but we're talking first and last name, social security numbers, and dates of birth affected by basically the affected parties. So first, last name, social security, dates of birth. So if anything to do with Star Tech, TEK, heads up to you. Moving on. Let's talk about TrackPhone. Those are those basically pay-as-you-go burner-type phones because thousands of TrackPhone users are encountering issues with their phone numbers. Apparently, malicious actors have been transferring the accounts to different carriers without the user's consent. Straight Talk and Total Wireless subscribers are also affected by this data breach. Fortunately, TrackPhone seems aware of this issue, and according to the Wall Street Journal, approximately 6,000 TrackPhone subscribers filed complaints about essentially their accounts being hacked. Many of them saw their lines transferred to T-Mobile's Metro PCS service. So if you use TrackPhone, heads up to you, make sure you've got that nice and secure. Somebody might compromise your phone. Apparently, it's happened to 6,000. Moving on. Let's talk about Farmers Telephone Cooperative, Inc. Now, this company experienced a, quote, data security incident impacting more than 8,000 people. And on January 16 of this year, farmers discovered the scope of the compromised data. Evidently, the breach resulted in the names and social security numbers of 8,099 people being compromised. So heads up if you have anything to do with Farmers Telephone Cooperative. Moving on. Let's talk about the American Osteopathic Association because they informed more than 27,000 individuals that their sensitive personal, identifying, and financial information was compromised in a data breach occurring as a result of a system breach. Now, in June 2020, the American Osteopathic Association learned that an unauthorized third party gained access and removed several files from their servers. We are talking about full names, social security numbers, and financial account information. So, once again, American Osteopathic Association, got anything to do with them, heads up to you. Moving on. Let's talk about Morley Companies because on August 1st of last year, they discovered unusual activity that was basically affecting their company computers. And after conducting an investigation, they learned that an unauthorized party gained access to names, dates of birth, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, health information, and more of more than 13,500 individuals worldwide. So again, Morley Companies, heads up, employees and customers. Moving on, let's talk about the printing outfit Calitho. On December 23rd of last year, they first noticed that they could not access certain files within their computer system. Ransomware, here we are. And so by virtue of that, if you're a customer or an employee, you might be basically seeing your full name, social security number, driver's license, state ID, passports, military ID, financial account numbers, and health insurance information be exposed. So there you go. Calitho, the printing corporation. Moving on. Let's talk about True Health New Mexico, because on November 17th of last year, the company notified the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and then began sending out data breach notifications to all affected parties. I don't know more than that beyond the information that was there. They had a breach that included full names, dates of birth, age, home address, email address, insurance information, medical information, social security numbers, health account member IDs, provider information, dates of services, and provider identification numbers. So heads up to you if you use True Health New Mexico for all your medical needs. Moving on, let's talk about the Rockingham Mutual Group, and we're just going right through these because there's a ton of them. According to a company news release on October 2nd of 2020, Rockingham Mutual Group learned that an unauthorized party attempted to gain access to their network, and the server that was hit basically contained full names, mailing addresses, birth dates, and social security numbers of 52,564 individuals. So if you use Rockingham Mutual Group for any of your mutual needs, I guess, there you go. Moving on. Let's talk about Daily Foods. While details of this breach are still basically not yet out there, as a result of this breach, names and social security numbers of certain customers were compromised. So again, if you have anything to do with Daily Foods, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about St. Clair County in the state of Illinois. They just completed an 8-month review of a ransomware attack on their computer system last spring, which prompted the release of more details about what happened. Apparently, more than 600 people in the county will receive letters in the mail this week informing them that their breach may have allowed attackers to view and acquire their personal and medical information. So if you live in St. Clair County, Illinois, heads up to you. Look out for that letter. Moving on. Let's talk about the massive security firm giant Securitas out of Sweden. You may see them, especially if your building or corporate building is renting security personnel with the Securitas logo. They are huge. They suffered a data breach which exposed 1.5 million files. This is believed to impact clients within Latin America, specifically in the aviation industry. One of the company's Amazon S3 buckets, big surprise, was not configured properly and left open. So we are looking at employee personally identifiable information as well as sensitive company data in at least 4 airports in Colombia and Peru: El Dorado International Airport, Alfonso Bonilla, Aragon International Airport, Jose Maria Cordova International Airport in Colombia, and Aeropuerto Internacional Jorge Chavez in Peru. Other files may have exposed other airports as well, although I don't have that information. The 2 primary databases containing information of Securitas employees and airport employees, photos of ID cards and other unmarked images, including full names, pictures of employees, occupations, and national ID numbers, were hit. The other bucket contained device models of cameras used, obviously very sensitive, especially if you can break into the camera system of an airport, as well as GPS locations of photos with coordinates and GPS maps, times and dates of photos as well. Now, unmarked photos also expose the data of Securitas clients, airport employees, and associated businesses as well. In addition to exposing photos, the bucket contained data from Securitas mobile apps used by security officers to help with several tasks, such as incident reporting. While the data did not expose any specific sensitive data, the safety detectives team that discovered this warns that they could be used to aid in criminal activity. Obviously, a lot of corporations worldwide, Securitas has hundreds of thousands of security personnel that essentially they rent out to various businesses, institutions, etc. And if somebody gets an insight into Securitas, there may be several clients that Securitas is advertising that could have their physical security at risk. There you go. That is obviously a major, major problem. So with that, no time to lose. We've got to move on because we got a ton more. And now we're going to be talking about St. Lucie County in the state of Florida, because residents in St. Lucie County may have had their personal information accessed because of a recent configuration error at the county's drug screening lab. Now, county leaders said the error was discovered on December 28th of last year, and that information was likely available to certain drug screen portal users between June of 2017 through October of 2021. A notice sent to residents via mail listed names, social security numbers, types of drug tests, and test results as the types of personal information that may have been compromised. So if you've taken a drug test recently, I guess actually since June of 2007, so the last 5 years or so, in St. Lucie County in Florida, heads up to you. You may have been caught up in this. Moving on, let's talk about iMed. This is actually an update from their 2020 data breach, because iMed has agreed to pay $600,000 in penalties to settle the case of a 2020 data breach that exposed the information of roughly 2.1 million consumers. Multiple states were attached to this. This information is coming from the state of New York, where their Attorney General Letitia James was leading that charge, and roughly 98,000 New Yorkers are entitled to compensation. That's the only information I have. As that gets more and more out there, I will obviously let you know here on Breaches of the Week. Moving on, let's talk about News Corp. This is the Rupert Murdoch-owned massive media conglomerate, and they own the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. Those specifically because basically this Friday they said that they were the victim of a sustained, quote-unquote, Chinese hacking campaign. Now, the company said in an email sent to employees that the attackers had breached the company's systems and targeted specific documents and reporter email accounts. Obviously, a very sensitive thing. The attackers only breached news organizations and not other News Corp properties, such as HarperCollins Publishers and Storiful, among many, many others. News Corp is massive, according to this email. So heads up, Wall Street Journal and New York Post employees. You probably already know you're under the gun. Now we all do. Moving on. Let's talk about Ubiquiti Network Appliances. Ubiquiti is one of the largest manufacturers now of essentially hardware infrastructure equipment. They do a lot of entry-level business equipment. Threat actors are using a customized public exploit for the Log4 shell vulnerability to attack and take over Ubiquiti Network appliances that are running on their Unify software platform. The first active exploitation was seen in the wild on January 20 of this year, and the attackers are using a proof of concept exploit previously shared on GitHub, the central repository that basically everybody in the tech community uses for all their programming needs. Now, that said, if you have Ubiquiti devices in your office or home or wherever it is, make sure you are updating all of those things as frequently as you can, especially the Unify software. If you are running it in your network, it is known to be susceptible to the Log4j vulnerability. And I recently talked to somebody who called it Log4j, and I thought that was pretty cool. I might actually be switching to that. That's pretty neat. Moving on. Let's talk about the island territory of Puerto Rico, part of the United States, because the Senate of Puerto Rico announced the week of January 27 that it was hit by a major cyber attack that disabled its internet provider phone system and official online page. Local and federal authorities are investigating this attack on the island. Now, according to Senate President Jose Luis Dalmau, there is no evidence that threat actors were able to gain sensitive information belonging to employees, contractors, or consultants. Hopefully none of the government officials as well. So heads up, if you are basically in Puerto Rico, your government has been under attack. Moving on. Let's talk about KP Snacks out of the United Kingdom. Attackers are holding KP Snacks basically due to ransomware, and they are threatening to post private files. We've heard this over and over and over here on Breaches of the Week. Now, the attackers said this past Tuesday that the company had 5 days to pay, or it would post details that it holds on employees on the internet. They shared examples of credit card statements, birth certificates, home addresses, phone numbers, all this kind of stuff. Now, KP Snacks confirmed that it had been hit by ransomware in January of this year, and said that it could cause a shortage in the distribution of some of the UK's favorite products. They make, if you didn't know, and I don't know any of these because, again, I don't live in the UK, but heads up, all you United Kingdom people, hula hoops, McCoy's, Skips, Knickknacks, and KP Nuts basically may be slowed down due to distribution, and they've obviously activated their contingency plan. So heads up to you, those on the island. Moving on, let's talk about the German petroleum provider Marquardt and Balls. They own oil tanking GmbH, and on February 1st, they confirmed that oil tanking terminals, which provide Shell service stations in Belgium and Germany, among others, basically, they notified that they were operating at limited capacity due to a cyber attack, and also another one of their outfits, Mabana Aft, GmbH, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, had also, quote, declared force majeure for the majority of its inland supply activities in Germany. That's all we know so far. So what we may see, and Shell has said that they do have other providers. So essentially, no Shell station in the area, specifically Belgium and Germany, should run dry. Nevertheless, obviously a major problem when petroleum providers are hit. We know all too well here in the United States, thanks to Colonial Pipeline. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Red Cross because chapters across the globe are now starting to declare data breaches. And this past week, it was the Australian Red Cross that says they were caught up in the massive global Red Cross data breach. There will be more, and I will be telling you about them here on Breaches of the Week as they happen. Moving on. Let's talk about Segway. This is the upright scooter company that I believe it was Jeff Bezos that invested very heavily in. Apparently, attackers breached the Segway website and placed malicious code on their online store to collect payment card details from online shoppers. Apparently, it's been identified as a Mage Cart hit, and I don't know how long they were there, but if you have recently purchased anything on the Segway website for your Segway or bought a new Segway or whatever you're doing on Segway, heads up to you. Your credit card may have been compromised. Go check those statements, possibly replace those cards. And if you use the password, basically to log the same password to log into Segway as you do somewhere else, make sure you're changing that password too. And always enable multi-factor authentication. Moving on, let's talk about the Washington State Department of Licensing, the DOL. They are investigating after they detected suspicious activity involving professional and occupation license data during the week of January 24th. Now, this potential breach could have affected thousands of professionals in the state, and the DOL took the precaution of shutting down the Professional Online Licensing and Regulatory System, or Polaris as they call it, to protect licensees' personal information. Now, the Polaris system is what stores information about license holders and applicants, which could include social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, other forms of identification, and personal information. So heads up to you, State of Washington. If you have used Polaris for all your licensing and regulatory needs, you may possibly be breached. And as that unfolds, I'll let you know. And finally, and we have a few different finalies, we've got to start with the NSO Pegasus. Now, I've talked about this at length, not just here on Breaches of the Week, but also on my normal daily podcasts and videos, and also on my radio show as well. And this is an update to all of this. And I think we're going to be seeing more updates like this for some time. And here we go, because the recent update is that the Finnish government, the government of Finland, said on January 28th that the telephones of some of their foreign diplomats were infected last year with Pegasus. This is the spyware strain that we've talked about from the NSO group out of Israel. They are now defunct. Now, Finland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that these attacks were discovered in the autumn and winter of 21 and 2022, and that the espionage campaign is no longer active. Officials said that both Android and iPhones were infected, and that devices only stored information classified at quote-unquote level 4, which the Finnish government said is their lowest level of classified information. Nevertheless, that is classified. No government ever wants to see any level of classified information get out. Quote, and I quote, however, it is worth noting that even if the information is not directly classified, the information itself and its source may be subject to diplomatic confidentiality. That is according to the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs in their press release. Now, in this press conference, officials also said that they are still investigating these attacks to determine who was behind the espionage attempt. If you recall, a lot of countries out there were buying essentially the Pegasus exploit from NSO Group. A lot of them were autocratic and authoritarian. And so who's spying on the Finns? We're hopefully going to find out. There you go. But they're using that Israeli malware or that Israeli vulnerability in iPhones to do it. So there you go. I will keep you up to date. And another finally we've got is, unfortunately, I have to once again talk about the 2020 United States election, because there's another data breach that's being reported on this. And understand that the breaches I've talked about in the past, as well as this one, are after the election, so don't confuse it here. As far as we know, and you can talk to Chris Krebs, for example, former CISA head, that basically said this is a completely secure election. There was no election, anything that we found. I'm not getting political here. I'm simply saying that what I'm talking about here is well after that, as people were attempting to look for evidence. So here's what's going on. Colorado's Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, is accusing a second county clerk of violating election security. That county clerk happens to be a Republican as well, and apparently, from what I've read, is a supporter of the former president, Donald J. Trump. Now, Ms. Griswold this past Monday ordered Elbert County Clerk, and Recorder Dallas Schroeder to hand over images of the county's election system that he said that he made last year in 2021. Griswold said that the system had been updated and there are no immediate threat to future elections in that county. But the secretary wanted Mr. Schroeder to disclose why he made a copy and where it is. Mr. Schroeder has joined a lawsuit against Ms. Griswold, filed in basically by supporters of the former president, Donald Trump, demanding a quote-unquote audit of Colorado's voting system. Now, another basically clerk in Mesa County is under federal investigation, and I talked about that. If you recall, I did an entire thing about Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium because I watched all 3 days of that, so you didn't have to, and I live tweeted it, wrote an article about it, talked about it live, all these kinds of things. And basically during the symposium, we found out that essentially the Mesa County clerk was there. I believe her name was Tina Peters, if I recall, and essentially was under investigation as they were literally basically making images and copies of essentially the voting infrastructure in that Colorado county, Mesa County in this case. And obviously that is a huge, huge problem for security. If that gets out there, people might be able to find weaknesses they can exploit. It's going to cost the county millions of dollars. And again, these are individuals that are looking for malfeasance in the 2020 election and taking it upon themselves, not going through proper legal channels to ensure that things like chains of custody are properly kept. And there you go. Anything can be manipulated. If you want to talk more about that, I have written extensive articles on Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium laying all these things out, including standardizations for chains of custody. So you can go ahead and read that on smirconish.com. You might know Michael Smirconish from CNN and Sirius XM fame. And finally, we have to talk about the Equifax disaster of a data breach back in 2017, because consumers who were impacted by that 2017 data breach of credit reporting company Equifax will soon be getting information on this settlement. Now, here's what's going on. According to the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, the settlement was finalized in January of 2022. So basically almost 5 years or so after this breach happened. Now, the settlement administrator has begun sending emails and letters to people who filed a valid claim requesting free credit monitoring services from this settlement. Now, if you recall, Equifax experienced a massive data breach in 2017 that exposed the personal information of what they claimed was 147 million people. We now know that is vastly underrated. It affected everybody, basically. Now, the company has agreed to a settlement with the FTC, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and 50, yes, all 50 U.S. states, as well as territories. I just mentioned Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico would be one of those, as would be American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and others. Now, the settlement includes up to $425 million to help people affected by the data breach. Now, don't think, oh my God, I'm getting a Ferrari on Equifax's money. You know that the lawyers are going to get about a third of that right out of the gate, which leaves, I don't know, 300 grand or 300 million, etc., to basically break up between 147 million people. But we are not all the same in this. And here's what you need to know about that compensation. For people who sign up for credit monitoring as part of their settlement agreement, I believe I was one of those people like years ago, if I recall, it can now be activated. Basically, the directions will be in an email or a letter that will be sent to you, or you can go to FTC's website about the settlement details. Legitimate emails about this settlement will come from the Equifax Breach Settlement Administrator, and we will get to that shortly. Now, the administrator, for the record, will not call you about the settlement, but you can reach the administrator by phone at 833-759-2982. Again, that's 833-759-2982. anyone, and I mean anyone, who calls you, texts you, emails you, asks for your credit card or bank account information, or says that they can help you get your free credit monitoring is a scam, and you should report them to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov. Again, that's reportfraud.ftc.gov. Now, the initial deadline to file a claim in the Equifax settlement was January 22nd of 2022. After that date, you can still file a claim for expenses that you've incurred between January 23rd of 2020 and January 22nd of 2024. That's right, 2 years basically from now as a result of either an identity theft or a fraud that was related to the breach. So, for example, if you experienced one of these, here we go. Losses from unauthorized charges to your account, fees you paid professionals like accountants or attorneys to help you recover from identity theft, other expenses occurred while recovering from identity theft, such as notary fees, document shipping fees, postage, mileage, phone charges, all that kind of stuff. You can also file a claim for the time that you spent recovering from identity theft or fraud between January 23rd of 2020 and January 22nd of 2024. You can be compensated up to $25 per hour, up to 20 hours. There are limited funds available, so your claim may also be reduced, meaning I didn't have to go through any of that I know of thanks to Equifax, and so I am not entitled to that compensation. But if you went through an identity theft and you can track it back to the Equifax data breach, you better get on that because they will compensate you, and believe me, it's better than getting absolutely nothing, and you should still be pissed at them, as we all should be. Now, even if you do not file a claim, all consumers, at least here in the United States, are eligible for free help recovering from identity theft, free credit reports for all U.S. consumers, and all U.S. consumers can now get 7 free Equifax credit reports per year through 2026 by visiting www.annualcreditreport.com. Again, that's www.annualcreditreport.com. Basically, a little more than every other month, you can check your credit score for free using annualcreditreport.com, and that is because of the Equifax data breach. Go get paid if that is. That was a mess and continues to affect everybody here in the United States and many, many, many people worldwide, as Equifax was a massive organization, and it really underscores the need to patch your systems because they did not patch their Apache platform, and they got right in. So there you go. That was their official reason. So there you go. Those were the breaches of the week, or I should say the last 2 weeks. It was an absolutely crazy long amount of breaches, but thank you for sticking with me. And as always, we're going to be back next week. And as always, please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.